I want to talk to you today about creation versus evolution, dealing with assumptions. Anytime we refer to an event that occurred in the past, where we were not there to monitor all the conditions available, we must assume certain things. And when it comes to life origins, which is the most important question we can ask about the past, how did we get here? And that will help us to determine where we're going after this life is over. When we deal with life origins, there are certain assumptions that must take place. Now, in dealing with life origins, there are only two possibilities to explain how we got here. We either arrived by a naturalistic process called evolution, or we arrived by special divine creation. There are certain assumptions that take place in either paradigm. First of all, the naturalistic assumption, the one that I was schooled in, the one that we're required to learn in our secular society. How did we get here? If we got here, and if life got here by naturalistic processes, there are 7 assumptions that the evolutionary community has adopted, which all must be true for us to explain that we arrived by naturalistic process and can look back upon the events in retrospect. And what are those assumptions? Number 1, if we arrive by naturalistic process, it has been published by G.A. Kirkut in Implications of Evolution in the New York Plenum Press some years ago. Number 1, if we arrive by naturalistic development, evolutionary development, then non-living elements gave rise to living material. Now, think about that for a moment. That's postulate number 1. That's assumption number 1, that non-living rocks, just chemical globs, gave rise to living organisms. Now, wait a minute. That has never been demonstrated. Billions of dollars have been spent in the laboratories. Dissertations have been written and in the libraries, written in the past and in Old English. And it began with Darwin to catch on, and then written today in our modern climate. And they assume that this has occurred. But Morowitz, some years ago, a world-renowned scholar, calculated that if you take the energy content of just one single cell, the energy content of the element's constituent compared to the energy content of those same chemical elements in a living cell, the chance that that could occur in one single cell is 1 in minus 10 to the 11th. That number may not seem large at all. Minus 10 to the 11th, that is 1 followed by, or 10 followed by 100 billion zeros. There is no chance, given an eternity of time, that that could occur. One chance in that number. But that's the first assumption the evolutionary community must make in order to explain that life got here and we got here by naturalistic evolutionary processes. Assumption number 2 is that spontaneous generation occurred only once, that these non-living elements produced a living cell only once because it is so unlikely. Once is enough and will never occur again. Well, it never occurred to begin with. But that is an assumption that has taken place in the mind of the evolutionist alone. Assumption number 3 is that viruses, bacteria, plants, and animals are all related. Yet we cannot transfer one into the other. Each is very distinctive. If we were related, there should be some way to correlate and transfer parts of us to others, which is not possible. So they assume we're all related, and yet there is no bona fide relationship that has ever been demonstrated. This is simply an assumption. Number 4, the assumption that single-cell life forms gave rise to multiple cell life forms. This has never been found in the field observation. It has never been demonstrated in the laboratory. But it is assumed to be true in order to explain that we got here by evolutionary means. Number 5, the 5th assumption is that various invertebrate phyla are related. that certain fishes without backbones and certain clams are related. But each is very distinctive in its DNA components, and each produces only after its kind. So this is not a bona fide assumption. Number 6, this is the assumption that invertebrates, those without a spinal column and backbone, gave rise to vertebrates, those with a spinal column and backbone. Yet the intermediates are still missing. Assumption number 7 is that fish gave rise to amphibians, to reptiles, to birds, to mammals, to primates, and then to man. 7 assumptions that have never been demonstrated, cannot be demonstrated, all must be in place for us to explain that we got here by evolutionary means. On the other hand, the assumption of creation is very simple. It is that living systems are so complicated. There is no way from the subcellular, molecular level, to the cellular level, to the level of the organs, to the level of the organism functioning itself. All of these must be interrelated and must be in place at the same time. They're so complicated that it requires a designer to accomplish. I think when you honestly consider the assumptions, creation versus evolution, you'll come to the logical conclusion that all living systems arrived by creation.